MTC EBS Mini Test 3.0.1 To whom it may concern. I am writing to tell you about my mother, Ann Diamond. Ann Diamond. A few days ago, she called to tell me about her new doctor, Dr. Kyle. Kyle. She mentioned that she felt uncomfortable talking to a male doctor about her problems. My mother is a very open-minded person and she rarely complains, so I was surprised to hear this from her. Thus, given her considerable treatment needs, I think we need to find a solution. After much careful consideration, I think she would feel more comfortable with a female physician. In fact, as far as I can remember, she has always had female doctors. I would be very grateful if you could change my mother's physician to a female doctor. I would appreciate it if you could do this as soon as possible to alleviate any further disruption in her treatment. Thank you in advance for your help. Sincerely, Shelley Diamond. Shelley Diamond. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC EBS Mini Test 3.0.2 On the last day of school when I was waiting to receive my report card, my classroom teacher informed me that the principal wanted to see me. I began to be overwhelmed with worries. As I was waiting in the classroom to receive my report card, I saw the principal standing in front of the classroom door waiting for me. Immediately after I was given my report card, he said, "Stanley, come meet me outside." Stanley. The rate of my heartbeat increased dramatically. However, I went to meet him outside of the classroom and he said, "You are such a good student, Stanley. I'm surprised that you did well in your exams considering your situation. Stanley. I have written this letter for you to give to your parents. You see, if your parents are able to provide what you need in school, you can perform extremely well. Have a safe journey home and enjoy your holiday. I hope to see you next semester." These words were so motivating and inspiring. On my way home I reflected over and over on the words of the principal. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC EBS Mini Test 3.0.3 Frequently the victims of confusing and inadequate information, parents have been told to be more patient by some and tougher or more demanding by others. They are advised to be more permissive or simply proficient at mirroring the child's feelings. Most of these suggestions center around the child. But in reality the whole parent as well as the whole child must be considered. Transactions with the child necessarily involve the parent's feelings, attitudes, and values. This does not suggest a total personality reorganization, but instead a development of new procedures and approaches for parent-child relationships. We strive not only to understand our children but to develop better ways to communicate and relate in our effort to build future generations. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC EBS Mini Test 3.0.4 The importance of cumulative culture can be seen in almost every aspect of our lives, but one of the clearest examples can be found in the harrowing tales of early European explorers to the Arctic, Americas, Africa, Australia, and Asia. On countless occasions, intrepid and well-prepared adventurers perished or nearly died, while just around the corner, indigenous people who lacked their modern technology were well fed and sheltered. It was our capacity to learn from the experiences of others that gave Homo sapiens an enormous local advantage, with new strategies and innovations built on a platform of prior discoveries. As a consequence, each generation had no need to reinvent the wheel, and a child could acquire an understanding of the world that a few generations back would have been available only to geniuses. We see this effect today, with school children learning of the discoveries of Copernicus, Darwin, and Galileo, and there is no doubt that a somewhat slower version of this cumulative process has existed for over 100,000 years. No other animal can do this. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC EBS Mini Test 3.0.5 Some people think that data drives instruction, but I feel that data is just a tool in the toolbox. What drives instruction are relationships that motivate kids to want to come to class and learn. All the data in the world is worthless if you don't have motivated teachers and students to influence change. We are in the people business that is driven by relationships, not numbers. Numbers can support our decisions, but relationships are what put them into effect. Show students their test scores for the quarter. Will that motivate them to perform better? Probably not if the relationship with the teacher, parents, and school is not solid. People who hide behind data sometimes use it as a way to communicate because they are afraid, or can't have difficult conversations when needed. Relating to students is what makes a school a great place to work in each day. By spewing data and achievement gaps, you don't build trust. We all know that we will only go as far as the teachers who are in the trenches each day. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.6. The eater may make an evaluation of his dining experience in accordance with the perception of others, perhaps a restaurant critic or a dinner companion. The individual diner will certainly be predisposed to favor a new taste if he has been told in advance that the experience is enjoyable. Even a sense of social position can influence an individual's reception of flavor. One may sample a new or a formerly reviled taste in socially elevated company and find the experience more appealing than when consuming the same alone. Some may overcome a revulsion to a particular food, such as oysters or brie cheese, because they consumed it in the company of those whom they desire to emulate socially. As in the audience's appreciation of art, the success or failure of a dish is determined by the eater, and that evaluation is culturally constituted, defined by social, geographic, and biological categories as diverse as class, race, ethnicity, nationality, and gender. What one group enjoys, another rejects, and often such conclusions are based largely upon consideration of the collective or upon conformity. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.7. New technologies can often help in crimes against wildlife, much as they are widely used to solve crimes against humans. In Italy, scientists were able to show that the blood on a knife owned by a suspected poacher had come from a specific poached wild boar. Scientists at the Center for Conservation Biology at the University of Washington have worked to find the origin of contraband ivory shipped from Africa to Singapore. Washington. Were the elephants slaughtered for their tusks all from one place or scattered throughout Africa? They compared DNA from the ivory with DNA patterns found in elephant dung collected all over the African continent. DNA. By doing so, they were better able to identify where the poaching had occurred. In this instance, they found that the origin of the tusks was a small area centered in Zambia. Zambia. The group's efforts could be increased to stop poaching. They were able to do the same with a second shipment of contraband ivory, detected in a shipping container in Malaysia. In this case, the elephants came from another region. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.8. The graph above shows the results of a 2020 survey on American adults' viewing preferences of watching foreign language films with subtitles versus watching those dubbed into English, by ethnicity. 2020. Overall, about 6 out of 10 total adults preferred watching foreign language films with subtitles to watching dubbed versions. 106. The ethnic group that most preferred watching foreign language films with subtitles was African Americans. 57% of Hispanics surveyed preferred watching foreign films dubbed into English to watching those with subtitles. 57. Of all the ethnic groups, whites had the closest viewing preference percentages to total adults. The ethnic group whose viewing preference percentages were closest to others was Hispanics. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.9. The pancake tortoise is very rare and suffered from illegal pet trade in the 1960s and 70s. 196070. Its tiny size meant it could be smuggled out of Kenya and Tanzania in very large numbers. It lives in rocky cliffs, hidden in crevices during the day. Grasses are very important for feeding and breeding. These grassy areas around the cliffs are disappearing through human activity, which prevents the species from increasing its population. The pancake tortoise has a lightweight shell, which helps it scurry along and escape from predators more quickly. The bony plates that make up the shell are reduced in this species, leaving spaces where the bones would be, making it less heavy and more flexible. The shell is also flattened, which helps the tortoise to rest or escape under very low rocks. If the tortoise falls and lands on its back, it can right itself quite easily. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3 No.10. 84. Assembling and using PowerPod Blender. 85. Holding the blade by the shaft, lower it onto the spindle pin at the bottom center of the jar. 86. Load ingredients to be processed into the jar. 87. Place the splash guard lid onto the jar. 88. Place the power pod on top of the lid, making sure it is securely in place. 89. Plug the power cord from the power pod into an electric outlet. 90. To blend ingredients, keep pressing the control button located on the top of the power pod. 91. Note. 15. 92. Don't operate the appliance for more than 15 seconds at a time. 93. The jar, splash guard lid, and blades are all dishwasher safe. 94. Wipe the power pod clean with a damp cloth. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3 No.11. 95. Share your adventure story contest. 96. We're excited to hear about your adventures on federal public lands and waters. 2021512022430. 97. Stories can be submitted from adventures taken between the dates of May 1, 2021 through April 30, 2022. 98. Submit your story at www.adventures.gov/shareyourstory by May 15, 2022. 18-2021-430. 99. Participants must be legal U.S. residents and 18 years or older, as of April 30, 2021. 100. Categories: activities, reflection journeys, traditions, family or group travel. 900 4500. 101. Length: 900 to 4500 characters. 102. Photos: 1 to 3 images to accompany your story. Photos will not be included in the judging criteria. 300, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 11, 20222531. 103. Prizes: a gift card, $300, $500, $1,000 or $2,000, and a National Parks and Federal Recreational Lands Annual Pass. Winners will be announced on May 31, 2022. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3 No.12. If you are reading this text in book form, the page in front of you is likely to be of a standard size that was determined almost a century ago by a committee of German engineers within a private standard-setting organization, and it was probably shipped in containers standardized more than half a century ago. 1. If you are reading this on a screen, the specific set of electrical impulses that creates the characters that appear before you was standardized by a more recent international committee of engineers, as were the software languages that make it possible for your e-reader to generate this text. Other such committees established the standards for the battery your device uses and for every switch and junction, transmission line, and tower, between your battery's charger and the power plants that provide its electricity. Similar committees of engineers standardized the cement and steel that make up those towers, the rivets or nuts and bolts that hold them together, and all the machinery that erected those towers and strung those wires. The power plants where the wires begin rely on scores of other standards created by yet more committees and organizations. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3 No.13. Computer printer manufacturers would like their customers to buy ink cartridges from them, at prices they dictate. However, they face competition from third-party ink producers who want to plug their cartridges into the printer cartridge slots, thereby intercepting the printer manufacturer's revenue stream. 3. These organizations act rather like parasites on the printer manufacturers. The printer manufacturers counter this interception using a strategy sometimes known as twisting and turning. This involves constantly changing the details of the interface between the printer and the ink cartridge. The effect of this is to increase the quantity of research and development work that the third-party ink manufacturers need to do to stay in business, which increases their costs and makes their products less attractive. 3. Also, there is a delay between the release of the printer and when the third-party ink manufacturers copy the cartridges. 3. The result of this process is a huge diversity of printer cartridge types. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3 No.14. Consumption today is so widely associated with the private act of purchase in the market that it is easy to forget that huge chunks have been public, and in many ways continue to be, in public hospitals, armies, schools, subsidized university canteens and kindergartens. Companies and institutions, similarly, are spaces of consumption as well as work. Looking back at the 20th century, including the United States in the age of affluence, it is striking how the rise of private consumption has been accompanied by the rise of the state. 2.0. State spending on public consumption has been complemented by credit policies and investments in infrastructure that made private consumption possible in the first place. We would need to worry less about sustainability if states had not built roads and motorways in the first place. There is still sometimes a danger in the historical literature of treating market societies as normal consumer cultures and planned societies as pathological misfits. But this presumes a single highway to a shared destination of the consumer society that bypasses the many different roads societies have taken. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3 No.15. As soon as you know what something is, you start to know whether you like or dislike it. This initial evaluation is immediate and unconscious, occurring in the first microsecond of thought. 101. This initial evaluation even occurs for things people have never encountered before, such as nonsense words. For example, one study found that among English speakers the nonsense word juvalamu is very pleasing, the nonsense word bargulum is moderately pleasing, and the nonsense word chakaka is very displeasing. Juvalamu, bargulum, chakaka. Although people can easily override the initial evaluation with further thought, the initial evaluation stands if no further thought is given. According to John Bargh, the lead author on the study, and no doubt the inspiration for the word bargulum, we have yet to find something the mind regards with complete impartiality, without at least a mild judgment of liking or disliking. John Bargh, bargulum. Put another way, people have attitudes about everything. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3 No.16. In the 1990s, the story went that access to certain tools and internet connection and a PC would enable access to high-wage jobs. 1990. Today, it appears that the tools were easier to get than the jobs. Ultimately, we must take into account the fact that as home internet access has reached a saturation point, though of course gaps still remain, the economic lives of working Americans have either not improved or have worsened. Hourly wages have stagnated since the late 1970s, while productivity has continued to improve. 1970. Indeed, from 2000 to 2013, the era wherein home internet access reached the saturation point, hourly wages for 30% of the workforce actually fell. 20002013-30. The story is worse for workers with only a high school degree, but even college graduates have seen anemic wage growth. And while gender-based wage gaps have narrowed over the last 40 years, race-based ones have been stubbornly persistent. 40. This is hardly the picture we'd expect if internet access increased individual economic fitness. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.17. Evidence is always better at showing what could not have happened than revealing for certain what did happen. That's why stories are valuable. By pulling together threads of evidence from many disciplines, it's possible to weave together ideas about the dramas that our ancestors might have starred in. We can even make educated guesses about what it felt like to be them. It was the challenges they faced, the solutions they found, and the trade-offs they made that shaped what we have become. To understand our ancestors, it's not enough to simply imagine how we might have faced those challenges or how we might have felt. We must think ourselves outside of the time and place we live in now. Our ancestors didn't just face different problems, they had lifetimes of different experiences and were steeped in different knowledge and beliefs. Our more ancient ancestors were physically different, and their minds had different capacities. They weren't capable of thinking and feeling like we do. And even quite recent ancestors, who may have looked just like people today, would have thought and felt differently. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.18. One of the factors that led to early democracy involved the balance between how much rulers needed their people and how much people could do without their rulers. When rulers had a greater need for revenue, they were more likely to accept governing in a collaborative fashion, and this was even more likely if they needed people to fight wars. With inadequate means of simply compelling people to fight, rulers offered them political rights. The flip side of all this was that whenever people found it easier to do without a particular ruler, say by moving to a new location, then rulers felt compelled to govern more consensually. The idea that exit options influence hierarchy is, in fact, so general that it also applies to species other than humans. Among species as diverse as ants and birds, social organization tends to be less hierarchical when the costs of what biologists call dispersal are low. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.19. The study of living control systems is the study of the behavior of living organisms. Organisms can be regarded as living control systems because their behavior is equivalent to that of non-living control systems. The equivalence turns on the fact that both non-living control systems and living organisms control, which means that they act to achieve intended or goal results in the face of unpredictable, and often undetectable, disturbances that would prevent these results from being achieved. For example, the thermostat, a non-living control system, controls by acting to keep room temperature constant in the face of disturbances, such as variations in the number of people in the room, that would otherwise cause the temperature to vary considerably. Similarly, a person sipping tea controls by acting to get the cup consistently to their lips in the face of disturbances, such as the changing weight of the cup after each sip, that would otherwise cause many a slip between cup and lip. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.20. Adjusting a mental model is sometimes very simple. How, for example, do we reach out to an object that we see? In the 17th century, René Descartes had already guessed that our nervous system must contain processing loops that transform visual inputs into muscular commands. 17 René Descartes. You can experience this for yourself. Try grabbing an object while wearing somebody else's glasses, preferably someone who is very nearsighted. Even better, if you can, get a hold of prisms that shift your vision a dozen degrees to the left and try to catch the object. 1-2. You will see that your first attempt is completely off. Because of the prisms, your hand reaches to the right of the object that you are aiming for. Gradually, you adjust your movements to the left. Through successive trial and error, your gestures become more and more precise, as your brain learns to correct the offset of your eyes. Now take off the glasses and grab the object. You'll be surprised to see that your hand goes to the wrong location, now way too far to the left. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.21. The American paradox, in culinary terms, is that although foods from throughout the world are available, and often affordable, consistency and conservatism are also needed. At one end of the spectrum, people who are exposed to new foods through travel and those who crave new taste experiences have driven the rapidly expanding market for imported fruits, vegetables, and meat products, cheeses, and condiments. The growth in ethnic restaurants has far surpassed that of the restaurant industry as a whole in recent decades. A survey found that Italian, Mexican, Japanese, sushi, Thai, Middle Eastern, and Caribbean fare have grown most in popularity in recent years, while interest in French, German, Scandinavian, and soul food has declined. One of the most recent developments is the success of fast casual ethnic restaurant chains, such as Chipotle, Curry in a Hurry, LNL Hawaiian Barbecue, Mama Foo's, and Pho Hoa. Chipotle, Curry in a Hurry, LNL Hawaiian Barbecue, Mama Foo's, Pho Hoa. At the other end of the American continuum of cuisine, some people find considerable satisfaction in the uniformity of a meat and potatoes diet. A national trends survey found plain American food most well liked by respondents, 66%. 66. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.22. One might argue that particulate sound systems are not unique to humans. Male humpback whales, for example, sing complex songs consisting of discrete elements organized into phrases and themes. Furthermore, individuals within a group converge on a very similar song, which changes incrementally throughout each breeding season, providing evidence that the elements and their patterning are learned. Crucially, however, there is no evidence for a rich relationship between the order of elements and the meaning of the song. Instead, the songs always seem to mean the same thing, in other words, a combination of a sexual advertisement to females and an inter-male dominance display. A similar point has been made about bird songs, which can have a particulate structure with discrete elements recombined to form novel sequences, e.g., in mockingbirds. Despite this structural feature, however, the songs appear to always convey the same small set of meanings, including readiness to mate, territorial display, and in some cases, an individual's identity. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.23. The core of journalists are often found describing themselves as the fourth estate in a mature democracy, fearlessly exposing public and political wrongdoing and holding governments to account in a robust and impartial manner. 4. Obviously, in order to ensure such high-minded independence, the news media must remain at arm's length from politics, but increasingly, their rhetoric has a hollow ring. In fact, it is more the case that the relationship between politics and the media is a necessarily inter than independent one, as each relies on the other for its survival. News media need stories and politicians need publicity. Sources, particularly those in government, are the lifeblood of news. The media, and television in particular, ventilate the realpolitik, with presidents and prime ministers announcing important policy decisions not in Senate or the Commons but in the TV studio, live to camera and directly to us in our homes. TV. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.0.24-25. Beriberi is a complex illness that results from a lack of thiamine. It has two forms. In wet beriberi, the person suffers from heart problems and swelling of the legs. In dry beriberi, the legs become painful and weak, and walking is difficult. If the person is alcoholic or has lost weight quickly, dry beriberi can sometimes also be accompanied by confusion and memory loss. Both forms of the disease are associated with diets that consist mostly of rice. Beriberi had existed for centuries in Southeast Asia among people whose diet was mainly rice, but it became more widespread in the 19th century with the advent of mechanized grain milling. 19. Until that point, rice was milled by hand to remove the indigestible husk. This kind of milling was done on small quantities on a daily basis and not all of the skin was removed. Rice prepared this way retained moderate amounts of thiamine. Around 1870, however, steel rollers for milling all types of grain were invented, and there were many immediate benefits. 1870. Using these rollers, the outer layers of grain were removed much more thoroughly, easily, and efficiently than milling by hand. The mechanized mills also did a better job of removing dirt, insects, and some of the grain fats, making the grain less likely to rot during storage. The milled grains therefore had a longer shelf life. People preferred the appearance, taste, and texture of machine-milled grains, and so this type of grain became associated with wealth and refinement. This new technology was widely and quickly adopted but came with a price. In the case of milled, or white, rice, even less thiamine remained than after hand milling, so as the new mills spread, so did beriberi. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS Mini Test 3.2628. Some years ago there lived on a small farm in Scotland a poor man and his wife, with their two children, a girl of 10 and a little boy of 7. Young as they were, the girl, named Elspeth, could do many things to help her mother, while little Johnny, with his faithful collie, Scotch sheepdog, would watch the sheep and cattle on the wild hills all alone. Elspeth, Johnny. He and his sister often amused themselves with teaching the sheepdog all he had to do. Now it happened that their mother was famous for making a particularly fine cheese, and she wished to send one, together with a puppy of the collies, to some friends who lived over the moor, in the wildest part of the district. She considered both the gifts valuable, and she was at first puzzled to find a trustworthy messenger to carry them. Her husband advised her to send the children, saying that he would rather trust Elspeth than anyone. Elspeth. So it was decided that they should go. The children set out in high spirits early the next morning. Elspeth carried the cheese and Johnny the puppy, which was too young to follow, while its mother trotted by their side. Elspeth, Johnny. They went on steadily for nearly half the way. Suddenly a violent storm of snow came on, driving right in their eyes. The whole moor was soon covered with snow and all trace of the path had disappeared. The unfortunate children completely lost their way. They were at a loss what to do. At last the night came on. Johnny began to cry bitterly from cold and hunger. Johnny. His sister, though suffering herself, did all she could to comfort him. She cheered him with assurances that their father and mother would be certain to seek for them. The self-denying sister took off her plaid and all her upper clothes to cover Johnny, and the faithful collie kept him warm. Johnny. For herself, she had only the little puppy, which she placed across her breast. With all their endeavors, if it had not been for a mass of snow which fell on them, and protected them in some measure from the keen frost, they would have lost their lives. The little boy slept soundly all night, but Elspeth prayed constantly to God to deliver them. Elspeth. Next day their parents and neighbors searched the country round, and by noon they reached the spot where the children lay, but they were covered with snow, and were too weak to call out. Fortunately the sheepdog answered to the shouts he heard, with a faint bark, and thus the little party were discovered and dug out.